I was 40 miles outside Damascus when my phone broke radio silence. One single vibration, no ringtone, no alert, just that vibration, the kind that crawls up your spine when something sacred breaks. I opened the encrypted feed, thinking it was command. It wasn't. It was my son, screaming somewhere inside my kitchen. And someone laughing. Turn on the oven. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. Dust was still floating in the air when my team finished the extraction. 8 men, 2 trucks, and a cargo that wasn't supposed to exist. My mind was somewhere else. For months, I'd been carrying a kind of peace I never thought I'd have again. A wife who said she loved me. A son who called me dad instead of sir. Maybe war finally gave me back a family. Until that vibration broke it. I pulled out my satellite phone, a device locked to only one emergency channel. It wasn't military traffic. It was a private alert from my home server in Louisiana. The feed came from a motion sensor my wife, Kendra, claimed she'd uninstalled because it made the house feel paranoid. I ignored her back then. God help me. That's the only reason I still had something to see. The file name was simple. KitchenCam_943. The first few seconds looked normal. Just static, sun through blinds. Then a sound. A small voice, trembling. Mommy, it's hot. Mommy, it's burning. My heart started punching against my ribs. The camera angle shifted, showing my kitchen, my boy's favorite place. Oliver was standing on a stool, crying, barefoot. Someone's hand grabbed his shoulder and forced him down. It wasn't mine. It wasn't gentle. Then, a voice. Male. Thick southern drawl over a laugh. Let's see if the tough guy's kid can handle a little heat. And behind him, Kendra. Her hair tied up, wearing my army shirt like some sick trophy, cigarette in hand, watching. No fear. No guilt. Just silence. She leaned on the counter and said, "Turn it up, Dom. He won't talk. He's just 4. Idiot doesn't even know where the money is." The feed froze. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My team was yelling at me through the comms. Mason, check position, enemy movement. But nothing outside mattered anymore. A soldier can lose a limb. A man can lose everything when the sound of his child's scream hits 1,000 miles away. My commanding officer barked in the earpiece. Delta 1, respond. You're out of protocol. I cut the channel, pulled the USB drone recorder, tucked it inside my vest, walked straight past my men to the flight sergeant and said 5 words that ended my career. Fuel the bird. Classified extraction. Now, the flight back was 13 hours of thinking and seeing the same image again and again. A little hand pressed against the oven glass. At every mile, another part of me died. That sound wasn't fading. It was following me like an echo through hell. By the time I landed, the airport felt wrong. Too calm. I got into a rental car, still wearing my gear. Every turn looked familiar, but nothing felt like home anymore. My house, once the safest place on earth, was wrapped in yellow tape and flashing lights. A paramedic saw me and froze. "You Mason?" I nodded. "Your boy's at St. Teresa's. Go straight. Don't stop." It felt like my heart braked and accelerated at the same time. The hospital lights buzzed with that sterile hum that makes everything smell like pain. I found Oliver in the ICU. His face pale, cheeks blistered faintly red. But God, he was breathing. There was a heartbeat. The nurse said, "Your wife reported it as a break-in gone wrong. Oven malfunction. We'll know more once he wakes." My wife, Kendra, was sitting across the hallway, wrapped in a blanket, mascara streaked, sobbing. She looked like a movie version of grief. Her eyes caught mine, and for 1 second, she almost smiled before switching back to crying. I hugged her, tight, waiting for a pulse of fear, guilt, anything human. Her chest didn't twitch once. Her heartbeat? Calm. Too calm. She said between fake sobs, "They broke in, Mason. They hurt him. They tried to kill us. We need protection." Protection. That word hit different when the only monster I needed protection from was sitting right in front of me. As she leaned into me, I whispered into her ear just 4 words. I will find them. And maybe that was when she realized I already knew. When she looked up, there wasn't panic in her eyes. Not fear. Just the smallest, silent smile. The kind people give when they know the war hasn't even started yet. The police left that same night. Report filed. No arrests. Home invasion stamped and forgotten. That's how this town works when the wrong people control the right pockets. But I wasn't built for paperwork or waiting. I stood outside the ICU window long after visiting hours, watching Oliver's chest rise and fall under the oxygen line. Burn tape wrapped around his little arms. His stuffed bear, half melted, sat on the side table, another reminder of just how close I'd come to losing him. Kendra came up behind me, whispering my name like it still meant something. Mason, we should go home. Home. The word burned colder than the desert nights I'd fought through. She was pretending like she hadn't cooked our life from the inside out, acting soft, broken, fragile. And every tear that dropped looked perfectly timed, like she'd practiced it in a mirror. I turned slowly. My voice came out flat, no emotion left to hide. You go? I'm staying. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't push it. She nodded, walked away, and in that small movement I saw the tiniest tell. The way she grabbed her phone, typing fast, like she was reporting to someone. The hallway lights dimmed. A nurse gently motioned for me to leave. So I walked out, but not toward home. I went the other way, toward the parking structure where police had parked Kendra's SUV. They left it unlocked. I checked under the seats, behind the glove box. Nothing. Until I saw the small memory card half tucked into the console corner, barely visible. I opened the back of my phone, slid it in, and hit play. A different camera angle. Not my kitchen this time, my garage. Dominic and 2 other men loading duffel bags into Kendra's car. One laughed. He coming back next week? Another replied. She said maybe never. Kendra stood there, leaning on the open trunk, smiling like a proud hostess sending her guests off. I shut the phone off before I crushed it. The screen cracked under my grip anyway. By morning, I met the detectives assigned to the case. Both looked half awake and overworked. Mr. Mason, one said, flipping his notebook. Your wife's got family connections, cousins, right? Out west. Yeah. Names sound anything like Dominic Valeni? My silence was answer enough. He lowered his pen slowly, eyes heavy with something between pity and fear. Listen, sir, that Valeni family, they're not your average crew. You dig too deep, you end up buried. Just let insurance handle the house. Move your kids somewhere safe. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I suddenly realized what fear looks like in people who've never fought wars. That night, while Kendra slept beside Oliver's hospital bed, pretending again, I went home quietly. The police tape was still loose around the porch, flapping against the wind. Inside, everything smelled burnt. Not fire burnt, chemical burnt. Synthetic. Masking agents. She tried to wipe something clean. The kitchen clock was stuck at 5:47 p.m., the moment Oliver probably screamed. The oven door still carried prints. I pressed my badge number into a tracking device under the counter and waited while the backup server loaded. The system rebooted in silence, old hard drives blinking like ghosts. Footage filled the monitor again, this time with timestamp overlays. Frames flickered. Before Dominic's face appeared, there was another earlier segment. Kendra on a call, weeks before the attack. She whispered into the receiver. He gets back next Friday. Don't screw it up again, Dom. I told him I was spending money on remodeling. He won't check. It was all there, every piece of rot hidden behind her smiles and fake concern. I copied everything to a drive and sealed it inside my tactical case. When I returned to the hospital the next morning, Kendra was gone. No nurses saw her leave. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Oliver lay sleeping, small and still, tangled in wires. The officer guarding the door looked at me as if he already knew I wouldn't stay long. He was right, because right then, the hospital TV switched to a live segment. Breaking, Valeni family private celebration tonight. 58 members, all gathering under one roof for a family event at the old bakery warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. And for the first time since that video, I felt something alive burning inside me again. Something sharper than rage, colder than hate. This wasn't going to the police. This wasn't for trial or mercy. This was Delta Force protocol, the kind no one ever writes down. I looked at Oliver, kissed his forehead softly, and whispered, "Sleep, buddy. Daddy's bringing you silence." Then I walked out. No hesitation, no second thought. Dialing a number saved deep in my encrypted contacts. When Blake answered, his voice came through calm, patient, but heavy. "How bad?" 58. He paused. "Family business?" "Mine." There was a short breath of static, then only one word from him. "When?" I looked out the window, dawn just breaking through the clouds, turning the city blood red. Tonight. The drive home that night felt endless. Every red light, every turn, every flash of brake lamps made my pulse heavier. My boots still had desert dust on them, but the weight inside me was something darker, something colder. The streets were empty, fog crawling low, swallowing headlights one block at a time. I didn't turn on the radio. Silence was louder. When I pulled into my driveway, my entire neighborhood looked asleep except for the flickering security light by my mailbox. The yellow tape was still wrapped around the porch, but I ducked under it and unlocked the front door. The hinges creaked like they were warning me to step back. I didn't. Stepping into that house again was like walking into a coffin that still remembered its occupant. The air was stale, tainted with the smell of burnt wires and ammonia cleaners, the kind used to erase blood and fingerprints. The walls looked the same, but something invisible had shifted. Safety felt foreign now. I went straight to the basement. Dust covered the steps, but my own footprints were still there from a week ago. When I opened the small security room door, cold air seeped out, brushing against my neck. The monitors were dead, lifeless. My hand found the back panel switch, toggling the circuits. The drives hummed faintly, one by one. A blue screen flickered, text scrolling across. System recovered from forced deactivation. I knew Kendra had tried to wipe everything, but she didn't know I'd installed a separate isolated backup powered by a hidden lithium cell, military-grade failsafe. I didn't trust anyone completely anymore, not even her. Somehow, that paranoia had saved me. The footage started indexing, listing files from the night of the attack. My eyes followed the timestamp. 5:38 p.m., 5:40, 5:44. Then the file I'd already seen, kitchencam_943. But below it, another file blinked open automatically. Not the kitchen. Different angle. The foyer. I watched Kendra pacing, phone in hand, whispering. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but excitement. "Yeah, he's still overseas. I told him plumbing broke. He sent more money. You'll get it tonight. Just make sure Dom doesn't scare the kid too much." She laughed softly, pressing her free hand against her neck, like some lovesick teenager. I froze the frame there. Her fingernails were painted red, the same red she'd smeared onto Oliver's cheek that day in the hospital, pretending blood was lipstick residue by accident. I let the video continue. Dominic walked through the door halfway through the call, wraparound sunglasses on indoors, his steps loud, confident. He kissed her cheek like it was routine. No fear of being seen. Hooks of their relationship went further back than I'd realized. She hadn't fallen into corruption. She'd grown up in it. My stomach turned cold. He pulled from his pocket a USB drive and handed it to her. "Your boy's little camera picked up too much. You know where to take it." Kendra smiled, sliding it into her purse. "Basement cleaners come at 6. Don't worry." She was planning to erase the whole thing, start clean, move the money offshore, then vanish. Their plan wasn't random vengeance. It was calculated. I paused the clip and looked around the room. Each monitor still flickering faintly across her ghost in the house. Even when she wasn't there, I could feel her perfume clinging to the air like something poisonous that didn't wash off. Something inside me snapped quiet. It wasn't rage. It wasn't tears. It was purpose, a bone-deep certainty that men like Dominic and women like Kendra only understand consequence delivered in silence. I copied every file to my encrypted flash drive and pocketed it. Then, just out of instinct, I opened a folder marked Old Ops. Inside, a contact list, retired Delta operatives. Guys who vanished off-grid after the sandbox years. The ones who didn't take contracts anymore because they'd seen too much. At the top of the list, Blake Mercer. Blake and I had burned too many memories together not to owe each other one final favor. I hit send on a coded message, 2 words only, need extraction. While waiting for his reply, I opened the living room drawer where I kept my old sidearm, still perfectly oiled, magazine intact. Pulling that weapon out didn't feel like temptation. It felt like balance returning to the world. Midnight passed. No answer from Blake yet. I sat by the window, looking out at the empty street. Then, at exactly 12:48 a.m., my phone vibrated twice. Delta tax signal for acknowledgement. 10 minutes later, headlights flashed twice down the road. Then once. Then twice again. That was him. I locked up the house behind me and stepped outside. The cold wind carried no sound, no trace of life. I climbed into his truck, the familiar smell of gun oil and coffee instantly grounding me. He didn't waste time. She crossed you. Worse. He looked ahead, unmoving. You got proof. Everything on this drive. He nodded once. Good. Because I heard whispers, Valeni family hosting a big gathering tonight. I stared at him. You already knew? He smirked faintly. Word gets around when 58 rats plan to toast their new partnership. Silence sat between us like an uninvited guest. Finally, Blake reached under his seat, slid a black duffel into my lap. Gear check. Pick your poison. Inside, suppressed carbine, signal jammer, thermal goggles, stun grenades. All civilian legal, none traceable. I ran my fingers along the cold steel of the rifle, remembering 100 night raids that ended uglier than they began. War always looks righteous from a distance. Up close, it's just noise and smoke. But this was clear. We drove across town, no music, only wind. The city lights shrank behind us as industrial warehouses rose ahead. The Valeni Bakery complex sat silent against the harbor water, a large brick structure that once fed the city but now just cleaned its dirty money. Every window glowed faintly orange, laughter spilling faint through cracks. I scanned through the binoculars. Armed men patrolled the lot, at least 15 with visible firearms. They weren't guarding, they were celebrating. Somewhere inside that building, my stepmother turned sympathizer and her Mafia bloodline toasted to a child suffering. Blake exhaled. You sure you don't want to call it in? No. They'll just get warning. They'll run. He rubbed his jaw, eyes narrowing. So what's the plan? I pointed to the top vent shafts. Oven lines vent through those chambers. Once inside, we jam their comms, isolate them room by room. Herd them like wolves back to the center hall. The old industrial ovens are there, big enough to fit small trucks. Their own fire will hold them. He gave a low whistle. Cold. Measured. We parked behind the abandoned docks. I changed into darker clothing from the back seat, strapped the vest, adjusted the comms piece. Every movement methodical. Training kicking in, emotions locked away like knives before surgery. I was steadier than I had any right to be. Halfway through checking my rifle, I looked up at the water's reflection of burning orange light in the distance. For a second, I imagined Oliver's face in it, small hand pressing against a glass door, whispering, "Daddy, it's hot." My jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. Blake noticed, but didn't speak. There was nothing to say. We entered from the side access corridor at 2:13 a.m. The world narrowed into soundless focus. Footsteps, steel hum, faint music echoing across walls. The smell of baked bread masked hidden rot of blood and sweat. The closer we got to the main hall, the louder the laughter. Money, liquor, betrayal, all dancing together. Every door we opened brought us closer to the heart of the hive. I planted small jammers along hallway junctions, lights flickering as communications went silent one after another. Guards outside started checking devices, confused. Blake took 2 out before alarms even armed. Clean, fast, humane. We hid their bodies behind cooling racks. Ahead, the main passage split into 3. Central one led directly to a pair of massive reinforced doors. Beyond that, muffled clinking of glasses. Dominic's voice cut through, arrogant, commanding, to family, to loyalty, to never trusting a soldier. I felt something inside me go perfectly still. Blake whispered, "You got eyes on her?" I peeked through the glass slit. There she was, Kendra, dressed in white, expensive fabric, pearls glimmering under industrial lights. She was toasting too, smiling like she belonged among them, like she'd never held my son's hand while he burned. Time itself slowed. The air turned metallic in my lungs. Blake's voice came barely audible. "Your call, Mason." And that's all I needed. I slid my finger to the comm switch. Seal the exits. 2 seconds later, power across the entire block went out. Darkness swallowed the celebration first. Then the noise followed. Confusion, shouting, panic. Mason's war had just begun. I moved through the first doorway, rifle raised. Voice comm behind the speaker mask, speaking only 3 words that froze the room. "Welcome to silence." Screams, gunfire, chaos. None of it changed my breathing. This was a different kind of battlefield. Every step forward erased what little left of the man who once believed love could fix broken things. And as Dominic's men scrambled for cover, one truth carved itself deep inside me. They still didn't understand. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was restoration. And before dawn, every one of them would learn what heat truly means. When the lights died, their laughter died with it. You could feel the air tighten, like the building itself knew what was about to happen. Shadows swallowed the golden glow of their celebration, turning every gleam of champagne into black glass and fear. For a heartbeat, the world stood still, then footsteps, panic, shouts. Dominic barked orders, his voice echoing through the wide warehouse. "Check the generator." "Nobody leaves." Nobody. He was still trying to sound in control, the way cowards do when they sense the ground cracking beneath them. But fear has a smell, and tonight that scent was everywhere. Sweat, liquor, gun oil, and guilt. Blake moved through the west catwalk, silent as a ghost. I stayed on the floor, weaving through pillars, weapon raised but still safety on. These weren't soldiers. They were scavengers dressed in tailored suits, clutching guns they didn't earn. Some tried forcing the doors, crashing into locked steel, shouting for help that wasn't coming. We'd already jammed their signals, killed their lines, cut them off from any outside contact. In this building, time belonged to me. My eyes adjusted as emergency lights flickered red. Faces flashed, panicked, distorted by chaos. Dominic's lieutenants were hugging the stage, trying to regroup, not realizing their enemies weren't surrounding them. They were already inside. Kendra stood near the bar, clutching her glass even now. Some reflex of vanity, pretending control while looking for exits her mind couldn't find. I could see the whites of her eyes reflecting the blinking alarms, as if she sensed me watching. Through the comm, Blake's voice cracked soft and steady. "North Hall secure. 5 guards down." Nobody screamed long enough to warn. "Copy. You want them hurted or handled?" "Not yet. I want them afraid before they die afraid." He chuckled low. Always the philosopher. I moved along the shadows toward the stage, near the industrial ovens lining the east wall. Massive steel chambers, relics from the bakery's old operations, their thick insulated doors painted red years ago and left to rust. I'd studied their schematics, each one sealed tight, connected to central control panels that could still generate heat if reactivated. They were my cage. The deeper I went, the more cowards I found. Men crawling under tables, women crying. All that Mafia pride scattered like spilled cards. Their hierarchy evaporated the moment darkness took their power. I didn't speak, didn't shoot. I just kept walking, boots clicking softly on the floor, my steps echoing like a countdown. I reached the center, the same spot where Dominic raised his glass minutes ago. The man himself now barked into his phone out of sheer denial, shouting into static, "Kendra, get your cousin. There's someone here." I saw the confusion twist his expression when her voice answered, not in panic, not in alliance, but in betrayal. "He's already here, Dom." The sound of her tone made his blood run cold before I even stepped out of the shadows. He spun, gun half raised, eyes wide. "Mason," I didn't need to say anything. The look on my face was message enough. He fired first, 3 rushed shots. 2 hit nothing but air and steel. The third tore through a wine rack, igniting a burst of fire. Perfect chaos. The sprinklers kicked on, drenching everything in metallic rain. Steam hissed, smoke bloomed, alarms wailed but stayed inside these walls. Trapped screams locked in with them. Blake dropped from the catwalk to the floor, landing near the side door. His rifle swept smooth arcs, taking down Dominic's men without hesitation. Non-lethal rounds, just as we planned. Fear is best savored before punishment. We drove them back, inch by inch, forcing the survivors toward the industrial ovens. They thought they were escaping, sprinting for the wide metal doors near the rear hallway where the lights still flickered blue. They didn't realize we'd sealed every other exit. From behind the far counter, Kendra watched as the realization broke across Dominic's face. His power, his men, his control, it all meant nothing here. Only heat and darkness waited now. I walked past her, barely glancing as she backed away, stammering like she'd forgotten every lie she'd ever prepared. "Mason," I didn't. It wasn't supposed. "Quiet," I said, voice low, cutting through flame and fear. "You talk when I let you breathe." She froze. The cigarette in her hand slipped and sizzled against the wet floor. Dominic made a desperate charge, grabbing the nearest automatic weapon from a fallen guard. He fired bursts through the thick steam, bullets shredding air inches from my chest. I slid behind the oven panels, letting him waste his panic as Blake circled behind him. Blake's voice came cold through smoke. "End this." "Not yet. They'll end themselves." Dominic squeezed the trigger until it clicked dry. The echo faded, then the low moan of metal. The sound of the oven doors swinging open, triggered remotely by the console I'd hacked in silence minutes earlier. The wide chamber glowed faintly, emergency systems kicking to life, heat coils starting their slow hum. The fools saw that dull orange light as safety. They ran toward it, thinking it was an open exit or power restore. One after another, they poured inside, dragging others in their madness. 58 souls looking for light and finding fire. Dominic stumbled last, his voice cracking. "Move." Inside move. They obeyed, piling into that industrial tomb. I stood at the control board, silent, watching their silhouettes merge in chaos beneath flickering alarms. Blake emerged beside me, dripping water, staring through the observation glass. 58, he asked. 58. He let out a slow exhale. "Jesus. Not tonight," I said, my hand brushing across the control levers. "Tonight belongs to ghosts." Kendra screamed from behind, rushing forward. Her nails clawed my arm as she shouted, "You can't. Those are my family." I turned toward her, and for the first time, she saw the part of me that never came home from war. Exactly. I pushed the lever down. The power surged. The hum deepened. Inside the massive chamber, the orange glow rose to gold. Men pounded on steel, shouting, pleading, praying, each voice folding into the next until all you could hear was raw noise. Smoke curled around the glass, blurring their faces into one shapeless, writhing shadow. Kendra dropped to her knees, sobbing, makeup streaking her cheeks into rivers. "Please stop. Mason, they'll die." I crouched beside her, voice steady, calm as a whisper. "You were supposed to protect my son. You taught him ovens were toys. You showed him monsters live in daylight." My eyes met hers. Now you see them too. She lunged at me, tried to grab the control, but I caught her wrist halfway. You think you're strong? You never were. You needed a family to hide behind, a name to feel bigger than dirt. But all you built was this. I nodded toward the roaring metal chamber, a grave that fits everyone you ever loved. The room pulsed red as the temperature rose. Sweat burned down my face, but I didn't move. I wasn't burning them alive. That would make me one of them. I'd calibrated it just below lethal. It wouldn't cook their flesh. It would cook their faith. They'd scream and beg and claw until exhaustion took them. And when the police came, they'd find them gasping for breath, unconscious, poisoned by their own fear. Justice wasn't about killing. It was about remembering. Across the glass, Dominic collapsed against the door. Our eyes met one last time. In that instant, he looked more human than he ever had. Terrified, bare, realizing the weight of every sin that led him there. I let him see no mercy, only the reflection of the fire he started himself. Then, silence. Only the hum remained. Blake turned, his face ghost pale against the siren light. What now? We call it in, I said, flicking the switch to vent the heat slowly. Let them live with nightmares. Let truth do the killing. He nodded once, understanding. He'd seen this kind of justice before, the kind that doesn't end with bodies, but with broken souls. Kendra stared at me, too stunned to move, eyes wide with a mix of hatred and shock. You planned this. You're insane. I turned toward her slowly. No, Kendra. I'm cured. Outside. The first wail of approaching sirens cut through the dawn. I walked past her, leaving her crumpled on the wet floor. Blake followed, tossing a small drive onto the counter as he went. Our footage. Evidence. The world would see what they did, just as clearly as I had. As we stepped into the cold night, I looked up. The sky over the industrial zone glowed faint orange, the reflection of the oven lights burning everything left behind. Blake muttered under his breath, "Gathering of wolves, huh?" I answered quietly, and every one of them walked straight into the den. The air outside tasted cleaner somehow, sharper. The ghosts behind those walls would never leave them. Their screams might fade, but their names were already ash. I pulled the hood over my head, felt the night wash back into silence, and thought of Oliver. Little hands, laughter echoing down a hallway that used to be home. He'd get peace now. He'd get to sleep without shadows in his eyes. Behind us, the police lights painted the warehouse in blue flashes. Officers rushed past, kicking the doors, shouting, forcing the heat extinguishers. None would understand what really happened inside, how revenge this quiet could still feel louder than any gunfire. The job was done, but something in me stayed burning, a pilot flame that never really went out. Blake broke the silence. They'll call you crazy, you know. They'll call it justice someday. And her. He nodded backward toward Kendra's silhouette, still kneeling behind the glass. She gets to live with remembering. That's worse than the oven. We didn't look back. Our footsteps echoing off wet pavement were the last sound that warehouse would hear before truth came crashing in. By the time I reached the hospital again, sunlight had started breaking through the fog. Inside, Oliver still slept, his little arms bandaged but safe. I knelt beside the bed, brushing the hair off his forehead. His lips moved in the faintest dream murmur. I didn't catch the words, but I knew he was talking to his mother. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. Because now, she wasn't the same woman he remembered. Outside, police sirens wailed again, louder this time, covering a city that still didn't know how much had changed overnight. But I did. And so did 60 people who thought they were untouchable. One message blinked on my phone. A private alert from an unknown number marked only by coordinates and one sentence. The wolves are quiet. The cub sleeps. I didn't reply. I just sat there, letting the stillness breathe through the halls, thinking of all the ghosts finally gone quiet in my home, in theirs and inside me. I didn't sleep that night. You can't, after what I saw and did. The human heart wasn't made to hold that much silence. The hospital hallways were still dark, humming with the low rhythm of machines keeping people alive. I watched Oliver breathe until dawn cracked through the blinds. The sunlight hit his face, soft and pale, just like his mother's once was before her soul turned black. And in that blurry half-light, I realized something. This wouldn't end with the Valentis. It never does. With men like that, there's always a chain, someone above them, someone pulling strings from the dark. The family name was only the face. The rot went deeper. I needed to go down that chain, root by root, until it stopped breathing. I left the hospital before sunrise, the smell of disinfectant sticking to my clothes. Blake was waiting at the parking lot in his truck, sipping black coffee like he hadn't witnessed 100 people nearly burn alive hours ago. He looked at me, eyes tired but sharp. News broke, he said. 58 survivors, minor burns, dehydration. Cops called it a gas malfunction. I smirked faintly. Gas ovens do that sometimes. He tossed me a folded paper. You're wanted for breaking and entering your own house. Someone's painting you as unstable. Some government suits asking questions already. I opened the paper, wanted briefing, my name, my photo, the label armed and dangerous. Typical. Blake kept talking. You said you wanted to end it. Not your way, Delta's way. If you still mean that, there's one move left. He pulled a small drive from his vest, sliding it into the dashboard port. A map appeared on the navigation screen. Satellite view of the city, zoomed into the docks. This is where they launder through shipping containers. Quiet spot, barely regulated. Word is the family's fixer is cleaning up the mess. Name? I asked. Blake hesitated. Grant Valenti. My chest tightened. Grant. Yeah. As in Judge Grant. The one who married your wife to you. The truck went silent except for the rattle of the engine. Every lie from the past year replayed in my head like a broken film reel. The man who gave our vows legal weight was one of them. Every time I thought I'd seen the bottom of betrayal, another floor gave way beneath me. Blake placed a hand on the wheel. Delta Protocol says we erase threats clean, controlled, no witnesses. You sure you want to cross that line again? You mean the line they already buried my family under? Yeah, I'm ready. We drove down to the riverfront, past a row of old warehouses and rusted cranes leaning over gray water. The world moved in slow arches, like even the dawn didn't want to see what we were about to do. Delta Protocol wasn't about revenge, it was surgical justice. Identify the infection, isolate, eliminate. No noise, no headlines. We'd done it for foreign enemies. Now, I was turning it inward. America had its own ghosts. Blake popped open the back compartment. Inside, the gear gleamed beneath the dim light. Carbon armor plates, silenced pistols, a surveillance drone small enough to fit in my hand. He loaded his rifle, then looked at me one last time. You call it Mason. In or out? In. We moved at first light, slipping through the docks as workers arrived for day shift. The cracked pavement smelled of oil, rubber, and salt. I pulled my hood low and scanned the perimeter. Blake launched the drone. The screen on his wrist project showed 3 thermal signatures inside the main trailer office. 2 guards, one seated at a desk, and one man pacing near the window with a cane. Judge Grant. He'd aged since the wedding. Grayer, heavier, but the arrogance was still the same. Every movement said power. He was organizing something, files spread across the desk, shipment manifests, bank transfers, names of officers on the take. The whole network right there, printed bold. We slipped toward the rear entry, blades silent against metal latch. The door creaked once. I held my breath, counting steps the way I used to count heartbeats under sniper fire. Grant's voice drifted out, deep and confident. We'll say she was coerced. A grieving widow. Army husband snapped. The public buys that fast. Make sure her lawyer pushes self-defense if the story leaks. Kendra. Always one move ahead. Her lies rewriting themselves before I could bury them. Even ruined, she was still dangerous. My pulse ticked colder. Blake whispered. 2 guards outside hallway. I nodded. Take left. I'll handle right. The first went down fast, no sound. One chokehold, quiet slump. The second turned halfway, mouth opening for a shout. But Blake's arm crashed down before a syllable left. Bodies dragged behind crates, footsteps unseen. We stepped into the office. Grant looked up, surprised but not afraid. Not yet. He smoothed his tie like a man preparing for a speech. I figured you'd come, Mason. Not many keep that kind of nerve. Impressive. Save it, I said, locking the door. He leaned back, cane across his knees. I can make this disappear for you. You protected society from a dangerous family. Let us bury it cleanly. You mean bury me with it? He sighed. Don't be emotional. Kendra loved you in her way. She wanted peace. Peace was my son screaming while your men watched. Grant's eyes hardened. Collateral. Nothing personal. There it was, the quiet tone of men like him, the calm of devils in suits. I felt the years of discipline inside me knot into a single sharp thread. I placed the camera Blake carried on the desk and hit record. You'll tell them the truth, Judge. About the Valentis, about Kendra, about everything. Right now. He smiled. Even if I did, who'd believe you? You're yesterday's soldier. A ghost. My gun came up. Then talked to the ghost. Outside, the city kept breathing, trucks roaring, gulls crying, water slapping concrete. Inside, his words spilled like poison. He confessed details, listed accounts, even mentioned names of agents who protected the Mafia in exchange for blood money. The longer he talked, the smaller he looked. When he was done, I pocketed the drive. Blake scanned the files, eyes widening as patterns formed across the maps. Jesus, Mason, this isn't a family. It's a system. Grant tried standing, leaning on his cane like it'd hold back gravity. You can't stop it. Cut one head, 10 grow back. Walk away. Take your boy. Forget. I stared at him, voice low. You ever hear the difference between a soldier and a hitman? He frowned. Enlighten me. A soldier fights for something that still breathes after he's gone. You stopped fighting years ago. He reached for a pistol hidden in the drawer. Too slow. The next sound was a single, muted crack. His body froze upright for half a second, then stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. He hit the ground with his mouth still half forming another lie. I ejected the silencer, cleared the weapon, and set it on the desk between his hands like a signature. Not rage, not triumph, just silence. Some men don't deserve their last words. Blake exhaled deeply, pocketing the drive we came for. Now what? Now we clean it. Send it all to the press anonymously. Every name, every tie. And us. We vanish. As we left the trailer, the first sirens began to echo faintly along the bridge. Too soon. Someone must have tipped them. Blake cursed, kicking open the alley gate. They'll paint this on you even worse. I know. You've got maybe 12 hours before your face hits every news channel. Then I'll make them count. The sea air hit hard, cold and metallic, washing away the smell of gunpowder and lies. The sky had turned the color of rust, and the wind blew sharp across the water. For the first time since that file from Syria, I felt the ground steady under my boots. Delta Protocol wasn't revenge, it was clarity. You cut the infection out before it spreads. That's what I'd done tonight. But as the sun climbed over the steel rivets of the dock cranes, I realized the hardest part was still ahead. Because cleaning the system meant exposing Kendra too. And somewhere deep, the broken human part of me still hoped she'd run far enough that I wouldn't have to see her face again. But fate never leaves debts unpaid. As the first police lights reflected across the river, I turned toward Blake. You get Oliver out tonight. Safe house near Baton Rouge. No ID, no trail. He nodded, gripping the wheel hard. And you? I've got one last ghost to bury. The road out of the docks stretched like a scar through the city. I didn't look back. Behind me, police sirens screamed at the dead judge's office. But that was noise for men who still lived in the illusion of order. My war had already moved on. Blake drove fast, eyes flicking between mirrors. The city lights flashed over his face, turning him into a blur of red and blue streaks. We can still run, he said softly. Disappear. There are places off the map. I shook my head. Running's how this started. I left my home, my kid, my instincts. I'm done running. He didn't argue, just tightened his grip on the wheel. Then we finish it fast. The plan was simple, too simple for anyone outside Delta. We had one name left, Kendra. After Grant's confession, intel showed she'd cut a deal with remaining Valenti operatives. She'd promised them passports, money, silence, in exchange for safe passage. They were holed up outside the city, an old vineyard estate that doubled as a retreat. It was fitting. Grapes, vines, and blood all ferment the same way under pressure. By noon, we reached the outskirts. Sunlight baked the earth, cicadas screaming louder than the engines on our bikes. The estate sat ahead, wide open fields leading to a mansion that pretended to be peaceful. Armed men guarded the entrance, lounging near wine barrels with rifles disguised under cloth wraps. It was their last den and my last promise to keep. Blake killed the engine behind a sloped ridge. We can go silent. No, I said quietly. Tonight, everyone needs to hear what they did. Every last scream. We took positions as the heat shimmered across the fields. My heart was silent, steady. Whatever man I used to be had burned away in that oven with them. What remained was focus. A purpose stripped of everything except truth. Blake set up overwatch with his rifle while I moved low across the grass, crawling toward the southern wall. The guards joked, smoked, laughed. That laughter had followed me for months, from every nightmare, every replay of Oliver's pain. But this time, it stopped with me. I reached the back gate, slipped inside as Blake timed his first distraction, a small drone diving near the east vineyard, buzzing like a hornet. The guards shouted, chasing it into the rows of vines. I slipped into the house through the cellar entrance. Inside was quiet, too quiet. The air carried perfume and spoiled wine. I followed it up the stairs, hearing muffled conversation above. Two voices, Kendra and her new contact, a thin man with a foreign accent. "He'll come for you," the man said. Kendra snorted softly. "He already has. He just doesn't know who's waiting for him." I waited in the shadows as she poured wine into 2 glasses. Her hand didn't shake. She looked elegant again, flawless, like the woman I married, until you looked at her eyes. Those eyes were empty now, all warmth burned out. She lifted the glass. "To family," she said. The man echoed her, and they drank. I stepped out of the silence behind her. You toast too easily to things you try so hard to destroy. The glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. She turned, face draining of color. The man beside her reached for his gun. Didn't matter. 2 shots echoed. Blake's work from outside. The man dropped before his weapon cleared his jacket. Kendra froze. "Mason, talk," I said, cutting her off. "Where are the rest?" She hesitated, searching for lies. Then she smiled bitterly. "Gone by morning. Money moved offshore. You think you can stop the Valentis? You cut one branch, another grows. Maybe. But this branch dies with you." She backed up against the table. "You wouldn't. Oliver needs his mother." I stepped closer, voice lowering. "You burned that word the night you locked him inside an oven." She trembled, for the first time really afraid. "I didn't light it, Mason. I only watched." I stared at her long and hard. That's what devils say when someone else does the burning. Behind me, Blake's voice came through the radio. "Movement from the east fields. 10 hostiles inbound." "Hold fire," I replied. "Keep them contained." Kendra moved fast, grabbing a knife from the counter, slashing wild. I caught her wrist before the blade kissed flesh. She screamed, twisting, sobbing, shouting curses that carried years of venom. I turned the knife slowly, pressed it flat against the table. "Kendra Valenti," I said softly. "The only thing you'll ever have left is your name. And I'm giving it back to the people you tried to betray." She blinked, confused. Then my phone vibrated. The press alert went live, the files Blake uploaded from the judge's confession blasting across every network. Her face filled the screen, evidence, accounts, her voice recorded from the old footage. The whole country knew now. The Mafia, the murder, the lies. She wasn't a queen anymore. She was hunted globally. Her knees gave out under her, sobs cracking through starched elegance. What will they do to me? I looked toward the window, seeing Blake holding the line outside as the men froze, their phones buzzing with the same news broadcast. They'll do exactly what you did to my son. They'll lock you out of every light. I took Oliver's photo out of my pocket and set it beside her before walking out. He wanted to bake cookies again. He's not afraid of heat anymore. You taught him that. Maybe someday, you'll thank him for making you face the fire. As I stepped into the sunlight, gunfire finally erupted in the vines. A brief, sharp exchange, then silence. Blake met me halfway, nodded once. She's alive. Yeah, I said, looking back toward the mansion. That's her punishment. The wind swept across the field, shaking the vines softly, like breath releasing after too long held. Above us, smoke rose faint from the chimneys, curling toward a sky turning gold with sunset. The hunt was finished, but something deeper stirred in my chest. Not peace, but space. Space where rage used to live. The ghosts finally had names, and names could rest. Oliver's face flashed in my mind again, pure and small, waiting for a father who came home late, but never stopped coming home. That was the only mission that mattered now. Blake looked toward the horizon. Delta protocol complete? Complete, I said quietly. Now comes the hard part. What's that? Learning to live after you win. We walked toward the trucks through the fading light, boot steps soft over dirt, the air turning cool. Behind us, the house stood silent, its walls catching the last trace of sun like an ember dying out. The world, for once, didn't feel like war. It just felt heavy, real, alive. And somewhere beyond the hills, a little boy would wake from his dreams, look to the door, and find it unlocked again. We left the vineyard before nightfall, the last of the sun fading to smoke behind us. I didn't look back. The house stood there, quiet, hollow, stripped of life. Kendra wouldn't run this time. The world was already running after her. She'd spend the rest of her days hunted by names she once served. And that was enough. Blake drove in silence as the highway unrolled into the dark. That same stillness sat heavy between us, the kind soldiers knew too well. Victory never felt like triumph. It felt like something had been cauterized inside you, stopping the bleeding but leaving a scar that would never fade. By the time we hit the state line, the news had spread across every screen. Judge Grant Valenti dead in alleged accident. Mafia family implodes, dozens arrested after leaked files. And between every headline, images of me. Grainy photos from the military archives, the word fugitive stamped bold across the bottom. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was a ghost wearing a name everyone wanted erased. But ghosts move freely, and I wasn't done yet. At the motel near the border, we ditched our gear. Blake spread maps across the bed, shipping routes, safe houses, old intel lists. Last waves already burning down, but one cell still intact. A cleanup crew. They'll come for you before the week's out. I won't wait that long, I said. He gave a dry laugh. You're gonna miss being hunted once it's over. Not this time. That's when the phone buzzed again. The encrypted one Blake swore he'd never see light. Only one person could call through that firewall. A woman's voice came through, low, careful, deliberate. Mr. Mason, this is Agent Quinn. We've traced activity tied to the Valentis. You have something of ours. Yours. I repeated, eyes narrowing. The drive you took from Judge Grant's office. That intel belongs to the department. And the department let my son be tortured. A pause. We didn't know. You knew enough. The line went dead. Blake met my eyes across the room, the quiet sinking in. They're not asking, they're hunting. Then we make sure they find what they're looking for. Before dawn, we reached the outskirts of an abandoned freight yard, the same docks where the Valentis had built their empire. Every evil thing had to end where it began. The empty warehouses stood like monuments to every lie spilled inside. We had enough gear for one last stand. A pair of rifles, flashbangs, smoke grenades, and a collapsible shield unit Blake had kept from his contractor days. His hands were steady as he checked the bolts. Mine were steady too, though for different reasons. You really think they'll send a team? He asked. They won't send a team, I said quietly. They'll send 12 men, maybe more, and they'll all believe they're the good guys. The waiting always feels longer than the fight itself. The mind drifts, to faces, to sounds, to promises you wish you'd never made. I thought of Oliver sleeping under white sheets in some safe house miles away, the innocence he'd never fully get back. Then I thought of Kendra, maybe crying into her hands, maybe already planning another lie. Evil never really sleeps, it just changes names. Around 2 a.m., headlights bled through the fog. 3 black SUVs, no plates, all government issue. The trap wasn't for me, it was for them. We moved in silence, slipping through the shadows of stacked cargo containers. Blake positioned himself by the scaffolding above the main yard, laser sight tracking down through the mist. I waited below, half kneeling behind a forklift, listening to the hum of engines fade. Doors opened. Heavy boots hit the ground. 12 of them, just like I guessed. Quinn was there, a figure in a tactical vest, weapon ready. Mason, she called out, loud enough to echo. You think you can play judge and executioner? You're finished. I stepped out of the fog slowly, gun lowered but eyes fixed. Finished, I said. That word doesn't mean what you think. She motioned, and 2 agents pushed forward. I let them. They came 10 feet closer, then the ground under them erupted in a burst of smoke. Blake's work, flawless. Confusion rippled through their line before the first one hit, then the second. Non-lethal rounds only. Precise, efficient. I moved fast, rounding the flank, disarming the nearest agent, slamming him against the metal crate. His gun clattered away. Tell her, I hissed. Tell her who covered them, who took the bribes, who let children burn while they wrote contracts. He stammered, fear cutting his breath short. Orders, above her pay. His chest slammed into my grip as a dart from behind struck him. I turned and fired, neutralizing the shooter before he could reload. The yard filled with confusion. Fog, shouting, gunfire mixing with the metallic ring of footsteps. Blake's voice came through the calm as ever. Half of them down. 6 left. Bring them in, I said. By the time the smoke cleared, Quinn stood alone. Her weapon aimed but trembling. Every agent around her unconscious, the air thick with silence. This isn't you, Mason, she said. I read your file. You were a soldier who saved people. Don't become what you fought. I looked at her, eyes flat. Saving people is exactly what I'm doing. By destroying everyone who crosses you. No, I said evenly. By finishing what your department couldn't. I dropped the drive onto the ground between us. Everything is in there. Send it to whoever you want. It's truth no one will believe anyway. She looked down, hesitant. That hesitation was enough. Blake signaled me from the top rail, detonation set. The crates around the yard trembled. I turned, walking away through the fog. Mason, she shouted. If you run, they'll bury you under this. I didn't turn back. They already did once. The explosion rolled through the yard, controlled, surgical, the way all Delta work ends. Heat washed across my back as the government's mess burned down with the Valeni's empire. When the smoke faded, nothing stood tall, just ashes, twisted steel, and a kind of quiet peace I hadn't felt in years. Blake met me by the bridge, eyes glinting through the haze. Trap worked. Every one of them. They'll wake up to the truth. Or not at all. I nodded. The fog swallowed our silhouettes as we crossed the bridge, light bleeding across water like fire eating the horizon. Sometimes vengeance doesn't roar. It whispers, like a closing door, like the breath you let go when the ghost inside finally stops screaming. The bridge behind us disappeared into the smoke, leaving only the water's dark mirror below. We drove toward the coast without speaking, the road humming under tires that had covered more ground in one night than most men cover in a lifetime. Every mile put distance between the fire and the future. But distance doesn't erase memory. It just gives you room to breathe around it. By the time we stopped at a roadside diner, the sun was fully up, bleaching the world white. Inside, the TV above the counter flashed the same headlines, but the tone had shifted. Whistleblower leaks massive corruption ring. My name wasn't mentioned as a fugitive anymore. It was whispered like a legend. The narrative was changing. Blake ordered coffee, black, staring at the screen. They're rewriting history, he muttered. Making you the hero because they can't admit they failed. Let them write whatever they want, I said, looking out the window. As long as they leave Oliver out of it. Oliver. That name anchored me. Every violent act, every burned bridge, every silence I carried, it was all for him. Just a boy who trusted too much and paid for it in scars. My phone vibrated again. A single text from an unknown ID. Safe house breached. Move. My blood froze. The location where I'd stashed Oliver, my backup plan, the one place no one knew except. I looked at Blake. He set his cup down slowly. What? They found him. We were back in the truck before the waitress brought the check. The engine roared, tires screaming against asphalt. Baton Rouge was 2 hours away. We made it in 50 minutes. The safe house was a cabin deep in the bayou, surrounded by cypress trees and water that moved like black glass. When we pulled up, the front door was wide open. No guards. No police tape. Just silence. The kind of silence that screams. I hit the ground running, weapon drawn, every instinct screaming too late. Inside, furniture was overturned. A lamp lay shattered. But no blood. Not yet. On the kitchen table sat a phone, ringing. I picked it up. Hello, Mason. The voice was calm, cultured, familiar. Not Dominic. Not Grant. Someone older. Someone I hadn't heard since my deployment briefing years ago. General Vance, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Disappointing, he sighed. You were always my best operator. But you never learn when to stop digging. Did you really think the Vallenis operated without oversight? Without funding? My hand tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. Where's my son? Safe. For now. He's with me. A little leverage to ensure your cooperation. Bring the drive. The real drive. The one you didn't give Quinn. Meet me at the old refinery sector. Come alone. Where the boy learns what real heat feels like. The line clicked dead. I looked at Blake. He was already loading fresh magazines, face grim. Vance. Yeah. The man who signed my checks. The man who buried the missions that went wrong. He's got Oliver? Yes. We drove to the refinery sector like men already dead. The complex was a rusted skeleton of pipes and towers rising out of the swamp, abandoned since the storms took the coast years ago. It smelled of sulfur and decay. I parked a mile out. You stay here, I told Blake. If I don't walk out in 20 minutes, burn it down. He looked at me, eyes hard. You know that's a suicide run. It's the only run left. I walked toward the main processing tower, weapons slung low. The sun beat down, heat shimmering off metal, distorting the air. It felt like walking into an oven. The irony wasn't lost on me. At the top of the steel stairs, General Vance stood waiting on the catwalk. For mercenaries flanked him, professionals, not mob thugs. And behind them, tied to a railing, looking terrified but alive. Oliver. Seeing him broke something inside me and rebuilt it all in the same second. Daddy, he cried out, voice cracking. Quiet, boy. Vance snapped, not even looking at him. He turned to me. The drive, Mason. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the small silver USB. Here, take it. Let him go. Vance laughed dryly. You think this ends with a trade? You know too much. You're a liability. He signaled the men. Guns raised. I didn't flinch. I just looked at Oliver and said softly, Close your eyes, buddy. Count to 10. Oliver squeezed his eyes shut. 1, 2. I threw the drive. Not to Vance, but over the railing, down into the vat of chemical sludge below. Vance shouted, No, diving for the edge. That split second was all I needed. I drew and fired. 2 shots, center mass, taking out the guard nearest Oliver. The other 3 opened fire, bullets sparking off the railing. I dove behind a pillar, fragments of rust cutting my cheek. Kill him, Vance screamed, scrambling back. Gunfire erupted from the tree line below. Blake. He hadn't stayed behind. Of course he hadn't. His sniper rounds punched through the metal grating, dropping another merc. Chaos took the catwalk. I sprinted through the gunfire, sliding across the grate, grabbing the third guard's ankle and pulling him down. He fell screaming. I didn't watch him hit the ground. I reached Oliver. His eyes were still squeezed shut, lips trembling. 7, 8. I cut the zip ties with my knife. It's okay. I've got you. Vance stood up, pistol in hand, face twisted in rage. He aimed straight at us. You lose, Mason. You always lose. I shielded Oliver with my body, bracing for the impact. But the shot never came. Instead, a loud clang echoed. Vance dropped the gun, clutching his chest. A red bloom spread across his uniform shirt. He looked down, confused, then collapsed over the railing, falling silently into the dark water below. I looked up. Blake stood on the far tower, rifle smoking. He gave a single thumbs up. I picked Oliver up, holding him tighter than I'd ever held anything in my life. He buried his face in my neck, sobbing. Daddy, it was hot. It was so hot. I know, I whispered into his hair. I know, but it's cool now. It's over. We walked down the stairs, leaving the bodies and the rust behind. The heat of the day seemed to lift, replaced by a breeze off the water. Blake met us at the truck. He looked at Oliver, then at me. He okay? He will be. We drove away as the refinery shrank in the rearview mirror. Just another tomb in a graveyard of secrets. Vance was gone. The Valentis were gone. The chain was broken. But as Oliver fell asleep against my arm, I knew the real work was just starting. Survival isn't winning. Survival is what you do after the war ends. I touched the scar on my hand, feeling the pulse beneath it. Strong. Steady. Where do we go? Blake asked quietly. I looked at the long, empty road ahead. Somewhere cold, I said. Somewhere quiet. And for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like peace. The highway stretched empty for miles, nothing but wind and broken lines passing beneath us. Oliver slept across the back seat, wrapped in a blanket, breathing soft and steady. Every sound of his breathing felt like a prayer answered. After all the screams, that silence meant freedom. But peace never really stays. Not for men like me. And somewhere deep down, I already knew it. We stopped at a rest station near the state border. Blake refueled while I sat on the bench outside, watching sunlight sink behind the trees. A news feed played from someone's phone nearby. Headlines about the refinery explosion, about the death of General Vance. The world thought the monster was gone. But there was something wrong with the story. The footage I'd seen before we escaped. His fall had been too controlled, too planned. The man had been many things, but careless wasn't one of them. Blake returned with coffee. You look like hell, he said. I've been through worse. He sat next to me. So what now? We hide. Raise the kid on the run. I stared ahead. You ever get the feeling we're still inside someone else's plan? He frowned. What do you mean? The Valentis. The judge. Vance. It all connected too clean. Every time we thought we ended it, another door opened. I looked down at the ground. Feels like the doors were built that way. Blake tilted his head, following my eyes, to the phone in my hand. It wasn't ringing, it was blinking. A single unread message from a number I didn't recognize. For words, he isn't your son. For a long time, neither of us said a word. The message hung in the space between us, heavy as gunpowder. Blake broke the silence first. That's bait. Don't bite. I wanted to agree. I really did. But the seed had already been planted. I looked back at Oliver in the truck. The kid was sleeping, his face calm, so much like mine. And yet, the voice of doubt whispered, what if the scars run deeper than blood? I opened the message and scrolled down. Attached was a document. DNA report. Issued 2 years ago. Name, Mason Carter. Relation to minor, none detected. The world went cold. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. My whole spine felt hollow. Blake leaned closer, his tone turning careful. Mason, people forge that kind of, but I already knew the truth before the logic caught up. Kendra's laughter flashed through my memory, soft and cruel. He looks just like you, she used to say, but she'd never meant it as comfort. She'd meant it as a knife she hadn't twisted yet. I stood up suddenly, palms pressed against my knees. We need to move, I said flatly. Where? Back to where this started. We drove for hours, through back roads and county lines, until the world turned into empty fields again. The town where Kendra grew up was smaller than I remembered. Half the buildings boarded, the others tired from years of rain. Her last listed house stood at the edge of town, a collapsing farmhouse, windows shattered, curtains moving like ghosts. I told Blake to stay with the truck. He didn't argue this time. Inside smelled of must and dust, the air stale with old rot. There were boxes everywhere, labeled with dates, letters, receipts, birth certificates. I dug through them like a man clawing through his own grave. Then I found it, a small folder marked with Oliver's name. Inside were 2 sets of documents, one birth certificate with my name on it, and another, older, dated before Kendra met me. The father's name wasn't mine. Dominic Valeni. Everything in me went silent. All the noise, the fury, the heartbreak, it just collapsed into an awful, hollow calm. That boy I'd fought for, bled for, burned the world for, wasn't mine. He never was. Blake appeared in the doorway behind me. He didn't say a word at first, just looked at my hands shaking around the paper. It doesn't change what you did, he said quietly. It changes everything. No, he said firmly. He's still the kid you saved. Maybe not by blood, but by bond. You gave him a life. That's worth more. I wanted to believe him, but every breath felt wrong now. Every memory I held of Oliver as my son twisted into a lie made by her. Kendra had planned everything from the start, down to the bloodline. She never loved me, never even needed me. She just needed one more name to ruin. I realized then why she laughed that night when I said I'd find them. She knew the truth already. I walked outside, air burning cold in my throat. The wind carried the sound of crickets and the faint call of a train miles away. Blake followed. You gonna tell him? He asked. I shook my head. He's 4. He just needs to know he's loved. That's all. That's what fathers do, Blake said softly. I looked at him. No, I said. That's what good men do. The world's full of bad ones pretending otherwise. We burned the folder. The papers turned to ash in seconds, curling into black feathers that drifted into the twilight. The firelight flickered across my face, and in that heat, the irony came full circle. An oven, a blaze, a truth too hot to hold. It all ended the same way. Someone burns while the other watches. As we stood there, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. Just 2 words this time. There's more. I didn't reply. I couldn't. The fire ate the last edge of the paper, and the darkness reclaimed the field. Somewhere behind me, Blake said, if she was sick enough to do that, she might have left something else behind. I stared at the ashes. Then we find it, and we finish her story right. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore or bloodline. It was about truth, the kind that leaves scars deeper than heat ever could. And if Kendra thought death had silenced her legacy, she was wrong. The ghost she made out of me was still moving, still hunting. The moon rose high behind the trees, glowing cold on the farmland like it had seen it all before. I holstered my weapon, stepped through the fading embers, and whispered to the wind, not to her, not to Dominic, not to Vance, but to the boy sleeping miles away, who carried another man's blood but still called me Dad. Someday, you'll understand what kind of love survives when everything else burns. Then I turned to Blake and said quietly, let's finish this. The drive to the city was long, the kind of silence that stuck to your ribs and made every breath feel heavier. The road was slick with an unfinished rain, night air carrying that metallic taste of storm and oil. Blake didn't speak for hours, maybe because he knew there wasn't anything left to say. By now, every truth had turned to ash, yet something still felt unfinished. Somewhere inside me, a single question kept echoing. If Kendra lied about Oliver, what else had she twisted? Who else carried her poison? When we reached the city, sirens painted the skyline red and blue in the distance. News vans crowded the courthouse steps, a dozen reporters shouting names into the wind. Someone was going on trial tonight. A special hearing, announced hours after the leaks hit the press. The government was moving fast, desperate to bury their mistakes before sunrise. And at the center of it all, behind thick glass and security lights, sat a man I thought was dead. Judge Grant Valenti. Blake saw him first. "That's not possible," he muttered, tightening his grip on the steering wheel. "You shot him." "I know what I saw." "Then what the hell's that?" I didn't have an answer. The man standing under the courthouse rotunda looked exactly like the one who'd bled out in his office. Same suit, same cane, same smug ease. Either I'd killed a ghost, or someone had buried the wrong man. We watched from across the street as police escorted Grant through the crowd. Cameras flashed. His statement echoed through microphones. I was attacked by rogue military operatives attempting to silence me. The narrative they spun was a lie. The government has regained order. My jaw clenched. Liar. Every syllable dripped arrogance. Blake turned to me quietly. "So what now?" "He's stolen the stage. You crash it, you become the story." I looked through the windshield, toward the courthouse windows glinting like eyes. "Then we make the story bigger than him." We moved through the back alleys, using the chaos of the crowds as cover. My mind replayed the confession recording Grant had made before his death, the one detailing every payment, every off-the-book deal, every murder disguised as policy. Blake had copies. That was our weapon now. Inside the courthouse, the noise swallowed us. Reporters poured down hallways, guards barking orders, staff running papers up staircases. We blended into the current, wearing stolen security jackets. My pulse stayed cold, steady. Every mission, every loss, led to this hallway. Grant's hearing was on the top floor, closed room, government heavy. I could see him through the glass doors, sitting confident, smirking as lawyers whispered beside him. The arrogance of a man who believed death couldn't touch him twice. Blake leaned close. "You sure about this?" I nodded. "We don't shoot him. We show him." He slipped a flash drive into the courtroom's media port while I created the distraction. Simple, fast. I pulled the fire alarm. Red lights flashed, alarms wailed, confusion flooding every hall. While everyone turned, Blake pressed play on the footage. The monitors on every floor flickered. The feed wasn't a broadcast. It was the footage from Grant's own office camera, the one from the night I confronted him. His voice filled the building, echoing off marble walls. "You can't stop it, Mason. One head cut, 10 grow back. Collateral damage is necessary." The spectacle froze everything. Reporters screamed questions, guards shoved through crowds, and Grant's face drained pale as the video rolled on, his own admission of guilt repeating across every screen in the courthouse. He slammed his fist on the table, shouting for them to shut it off, but it was too late. The truth had worms of its own. It had already crawled into every phone, every stream, every live feed. By the time police pushed into the room, the judges on the bench looked at each other with unmasked horror. Grant stood up, shaking. "You don't know what you're doing," he shouted, voice breaking. "There are powers bigger than me." He locked eyes with me through the glass then, recognition blooming into fear. "You," he hissed. "You were supposed to burn with them." Maybe I should have walked away, but I didn't. I pushed through the barrier, using the chaos as cover. He swung his cane at me, but I caught it midair, twisting it from his grip. The room fell silent except for his own video, still whispering from the monitors. "This isn't court anymore," I said quietly. "This is sentence." He stumbled back, toward the window. Cameras still rolling, police shouting, crowd roaring outside. "You can't kill me, Mason. The world needs order." I took one step closer, my voice lower than a whisper. "The world needs truth." Behind me, Blake grabbed my shoulder. "Enough." I looked at Grant one last time, and in that terrible silence, I realized something. Death was mercy for men like him. Oblivion was their peace. Living, living as a fallen god, that was the punishment. I dropped the cane at his feet and stepped back. Let the people judge. We left before they cuffed him. The courthouse lights burned through the night as they dragged him out, his once perfect suit torn, his name echoing through microphones that no longer worked in his favor. This time, there were no guards to protect him, no family to pull strings. Only questions, and not enough lies to bury them. Outside, rain started to fall, washing the streets clean, but not the guilt. Blake leaned against the truck, exhaling slow. That's it, Mason. It's over. I looked out at the drenched courthouse steps, the mob of cameras, the flashes of lightning reflecting off the glass, and said quietly, "No, it's just balanced." He frowned. "Balanced? Yeah," I said, watching the rain hit my hands. "Some fights don't end. They steady. That's enough." We drove off again, the glow of the courthouse shrinking in the mirrors. For once, I didn't feel hunted. For once, nobody was aiming at us. The road ahead didn't look like an escape. It looked like an answer. Oliver slept in the back seat again that night, rain tapping against the window, his tiny hand clutching mine in his sleep. Maybe the truth was ugly, but it had bought him a world without monsters. And that, finally, was worth everything I had left. Morning sunlight dripped through the trees like golden rain. It was the first dawn in months that didn't smell like smoke or fear. The storms had passed, the sirens had gone silent, and the world, my world, finally stood still. The truck's tires crunched over gravel as we reached the cabin by the lake. This place wasn't big, but it was untouched, waiting. Blake parked near the old pier, the same water reflecting the sky, so clearly it looked like we were standing above the clouds. Oliver stirred awake in the back seat, blinking against the brightness. His bandaged hand reached for mine and gripped it tight. "Daddy," he whispered, voice small. "Are we safe now?" I took a deep breath before answering. "Yeah, buddy. We're safe now." He looked outside, eyes wide with wonder, pointing at the lake. "Can we swim today?" "Not today," I said, smiling faintly. "But soon. You'll swim when the water feels warm again." He smiled back, and God, it felt real this time. No fear, no shadow behind his laugh. Just a boy being a boy again. I stepped outside, letting the cool air wash across my face. The quiet stretched far, broken only by the rustle of trees and the distant sound of water brushing against the rocks. Blake joined me, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. He looked tired, older, but there was peace on his face too. "You ever think," he said softly, "maybe we were never made for peace?" I glanced at him. Maybe not, but the kid deserves it. We stood in silence for a long time, watching Oliver run circles near the pier, his laughter mixing with the morning breeze. Everything we'd done, every shadow, every scar, all of it led here. The monsters were gone. The lies had burned away. And in place of the ruins, something fragile had begun to grow again. Still, behind peace, truth always lingers like a faint scar. I could live with that. Sometimes scars don't remind you what was broken. They remind you that you healed stronger than before. I placed one photo frame on the porch railing, the last picture of Kendra and Oliver together, before everything turned dark. She was gone now, but her ghost didn't haunt me anymore. It just reminded me that love, like fire, either warms or destroys depending on who holds it. Blake exhaled, pulling the truck keys from his pocket. "You sure this is where we part?" "Yeah," I said softly. "You saved us more times than I can count. It's time for you to rest too." He nodded, tight smile forming. "What'll you do now?" "Raise him right. Teach him what love looks like when it doesn't hurt." He chuckled. "Maybe that's the hardest mission yet." "Yeah," I said, looking at Oliver. "But it's the only one worth finishing." As Blake drove off, I carried Oliver's small hand in mine down the wooden dock. The sunlight warmed the water until it shimmered silver. He looked up at me again. "Daddy." "Yeah, buddy." He pointed at the clouds. "Are we ever going to see Mommy again?" The question cut deep, but somehow it didn't break me. I knelt beside him, brushing his hair gently. She's gone, Oliver. But what matters is you're still here. You're the part of her I get to keep and to protect. He nodded quietly, eyes down on the water. I think she's sorry. Maybe, I said, my throat thick. Maybe we all are. The two of us sat there until the sun rose higher and warmed the air around us. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive, not as a soldier, not as a ghost, but as something I'd forgotten how to be. A father. The story was finished. No more running, no more blood. Just days ahead waiting to be filled with ordinary things. Breakfasts, fishing trips, laughter. Maybe that was real revenge. To live well after death, try to take everything. I stood, lifting Oliver into my arms, his head resting against my shoulder. Let's go home, I whispered. It's time we learn how to start over. As we walked back toward the cabin, his voice came soft but sure. Can I bake cookies again? I smiled, tears burning behind my eyes. Yeah, buddy. This time, the oven stays safe. The lake caught our reflections, two figures walking through sunlight, leaving shadows behind. The past didn't vanish, but it quieted. And maybe that was enough. Because peace doesn't come when you forget your ghosts. It comes when they finally stop chasing you. And if you've reached this moment, what would you have done if it was your family? Would you forgive, or would you fight? I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. And if this story gripped you till the end, tap that like button gently, hit subscribe, and keep the bell on, so you don't miss the next thrilling and emotional revenge story we create together. Tell me in the comments what kind of stories you love the most. More family betrayals, dramatic revenge tales, or emotional redemption journeys. Because your words decide what comes next. Until our next thriller and epic revenge story, stay safe, stay kind, and take care of your heart before the world tests it.